Watch this! This is the heavy monster sound!
Conditioning for athletes is hard. There's nothing that really truly replicates the game other than actually playing the game itself. So how do we train appropriately for our sport when we can't play it? So in the big picture, there's a few different types of training that we do. There's our longer form stuff, there's our intervals, and then we have our sprints. The way to think about these is how much work you're doing compared to how much rest you're doing. That's called work to rest ratio. So if I go on a 5K jog, then that's very high work to zero rest. One thing that I would mention with this long form type of training is that it doesn't need to be 100% work to zero rest. It's just that we've got very high work compared to our rest. Then as we change these numbers, you're then going to higher rest to lower work. So on the other end of that spectrum is sprints. When you're sprinting, an effort might go from 3 to 10 seconds maybe, but then you're going to rest for sometimes a minute at a time. Then you've got intervals, which occupy the large space in the middle. They can be relatively higher work intervals, where you might be going for 3 minutes and then resting for 1, or they might be low. You might be working for 15 seconds and resting for 45. But generally, those occupy the space in between. Now that's a very simplified explanation of conditioning for athletes, but with that we can then build off a full training program. If the athlete is dedicating 3 days of their training to conditioning, we might do 1 day of longer form, we might do 1 day of medium intervals, and then we might do 1 day of sprints. Day 1 might just be some longer form conditioning. This might mean a 2K or a 5K. It might also mean some really high-end intervals. So we might have intervals where we're running for 2 minutes and then walking for 1. From there, your second day might have intervals where it more accurately represents the sport. If you've got a sport where half the time you're in defense and you're kind of standing in your position, maybe walking a little bit, and then the other half of the time you're running down the court, then it might be worth doing some 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off intervals. And then sprints. This doesn't mean that you need to be really strict with what you're doing. It just means that you're doing very high intensity efforts for very short periods of time. Also note that this applies to various implements. You could be on a bike, you could be swimming, you could be running, even battle ropes work. Just aware that at least some of this should be specific to your sport. Keep in mind though, that if you do train or play on surfaces that can be quite tough on your body, it might be worth having a go at bike, swimming, or battle ropes, because you're going to be able to get this conditioning in without the extra load on your body. And there you have a program. You don't need to get too specific with this, and some of the time it's just good to do what you enjoy. But if you have access to a strength and conditioning coach or someone that you trust with your training, I'd say access them. So save this video for all of your conditioning training needs, let me know if you need a hand, and then go smash your conditioning work.